Okay. Yeah. So good discussion on my breakout room. We were really looking for ways that Gen3 can add more standards to sort of make ourselves more in line with what the community wants, and have tools that other people would like to see that would help them do their work easier. So for one of them was Beacon. Some people were looking at Beacon and how um, I I naively asked, is this the um, variant location tool, which it is, but apparently the new standard of Beacon allows for searching of metadata across a bunch of different dictionaries would be, I guess, a good word. So I think we're going to take a look at Beacon to see if we can use this across multiple Gen3 commons to sort of come up with a way that someone can do searches on data models between Gen3 commons. There was also an ask for a better way to generate passports on Gen3. That might be a question that Alex would, not a question, but something that Alex would be more in line with answering, or Banam, who I don't think is on this call. Workflows. There was some good discussion on workflows like Wes and using tests to sort of do preliminary workflows on data inside of Gen3 so that someone could then use those artifact files and put them back into the graph to sort of show the results of what they were doing. I think this is a great idea for getting research done within Gen3 where multiple people can use the same data, have that data be a part of the graph, and then they can search the graph and see what has been done already, and have that as like a source of truth of the work that has been done for the research. There's also some questions about consent management through AAI. I am not a good person to ask about that. I really don't have a very good grasp on the AAI and consent management. I think NAH does a lot of that already, and then when we pull in data, it sort of already has all the consent outlined for us to use. And like I said, in the other discussion topics, is there a way to generate passports ourselves? I think we just need to be more proactive with how we show passports and use passports in our systems and stuff like that.
Why don't we, does anyone else from the group have a comment from the who was in the breakout group? And following that, we'll open it up to general comments. Any general comments from anyone? And the consent stuff, you know, many of the Gen3 commons are not associated with NIH, and certainly the ones elsewhere in the world aren't. So we can revisit that. We can follow up on the consent stuff. Any comments from people? Anyone in the listening today? Did RDA come up at all, research data lines? I know I've been in joint meetings with the RDA. They're quite active in commons. Do we have any RDA participants on the call today? Okay.
One thing I'm kind of curious of is the GA4GH passports. I'm just bringing this up as kind of something I've heard a lot about and continue to hear a lot about, and know that Fence plays a really central role in that whole ecosystem. It might be nice to have some, as a Gen3 implementer that might need to consider this in the future. What does this really mean to me? Might be nice to have a worked example out there, or a toy commons or some slideware, just some educational information about it.
Right, can you say that again? Just sort of our experience with implementing visas, passports, and
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I wasn't close to the microphone. Yeah, just from an educational standpoint, I hear a lot about GA4GH passports. Know that fences kind of it plays a central role in that whole community, and I haven't had my hands on it personally, and I'm wondering if there's a toy commons or a worked example or slideware or something like that that says, you know, as a Gen 3 implementer, here's what you need to know to plan to support GA4GH passports or whatnot.
I can maybe speak to that.
Sure.
Yeah, so the state that we're in right now is that you know, we've built support in defense for RAS passports, and we've attempted to generically implement it such that we can support other GA4GH passports in the future, but that design is not completed, nor have we started work on the generic passport support.
Okay.
If you want to read where we are today, the fence repo in the docs folder has a GA4GH passports README that walks through the implementation details of what we did to support RAS, which ideally is extensible to Gen 3 generated passports in the future, and also any sort of other passport, but the work to actually support any passport other than RAS is to do at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Any other comments? Okay, in the interest of time, let's go to breakout group 2. Jawad, can you, or whoever's reporting back, talk about a little bit about what you covered? And then we'll open it up for discussion.
Yep. We covered a little bit about like cloud automation, how it uses Terraform today to deploy to AWS, and how we manage our day-to-day housekeeping tasks. I went into a little bit of the challenges that we face with cloud automation and how it's harder to make sure that we can run Gen 3 anywhere, and also not accrue tech debt. We talked a little bit about the admin VM dependency, and then we went into Helm and how in the future now we will have a easier way to deploy Gen 3, and hopefully we can deploy Gen 3 anywhere. And as it gets easier to deploy Gen 3, it's also going to get easier to develop Gen 3. And I mentioned we will be adding guides for setting up telepresence and other tools that help make the developer experience on Gen 3 a lot better than it is today.
Did you give them guidance about when they will be able to use Helm, will be able to sort of run Gen 3 on their laptop?
Yeah, that's kind of possible right now. So I went over how to do that right now, and how it'll be even easier in the future with a single chart deployment to our laptops as well. And I've had people reach out to me on the Slack, and I've added them to the repository as it is right now. And if anybody else wants to be added as well, please reach out, and then I can add you, and then you should be able to deploy Gen 3 on your laptops.
First, comments, discussion from the anyone in that breakout session? Comments, discussion from anyone?
It's very exciting.
Yes, it is.
It is. And some people have been holding their breath, so I'm glad they don't have to hold their breath any longer. Any other discussion?
I'm just interested in how the OpenStack-based deployments receive this, or thoughts and around this.
Yeah, for sure. So since Helm will be independent of the underlying cloud infrastructure and all it requires is Kubernetes, you should be able to deploy these Helm charts to any sort of Kubernetes cluster, including one on OpenStack. Some functionality might require some manual setup. So basically set up the appropriate IAM roles and stuff if you need to interact with any cloud resources. And we're actively working on making that easier to customize, basically. Yep.
Jawad, is there a process if they sort of build it out a bit on OpenStack, how we get that back in?
Yeah, definitely. So the way we're architecting these Helm charts is that they are going to be Kubernetes first approach, and then any prerequisites that you have tied to the actual cloud provider that you're running into, we're trying to jam that into a Kubernetes job that can go in and set that up for us. So depending on what you configure your Helm charts to target, then that job might execute different things. So if you're deploying against AWS, it can spin up S3 buckets and IAM roles and whatever Gen3 services require. If you're targeting Google Cloud, then you can set up a Google Cloud bucket and etc. So once we set up that framework, theoretically, you should be able to extend Gen3 to run anywhere, and we can be truly cloud agnostic.
Is this one of the things we should possibly discuss in a monthly Zoom call?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm open for it.
All right. Any other comments? Pauline, do you want to go over the report back from breakout 3?
Actually, I can take this one.
Thank you.
So,
You want to introduce yourself, sir?
oh, sure. I'm Sarah Volk de Garcia, and I'm with the Plan 10 User Services team. And so in our breakout, we discussed best practices for submitting a fix, or sorry, for submitting a bug, for communicating a fix, and for bug tracking. And what quickly emerged as one of the key needs for the community was a need for a ticketing system, because so much of it right now is internal and opaque to the community. And so the ticketing system would make it a lot easier for the community to report bugs and then track the progress of bug resolution. And it would make it easier for the community to see what bugs have been reported, and just generally would make it much more transparent. And of course, though, we would not want to reveal bugs that were critical defects until we had a solution for them. You know, there was a fix available. Although that was actually another feature that the community said that they wanted. They wanted to be able to identify, not, just see a collection of bugs, but instead have a better understanding of which bugs were, serious bugs, which bugs, were crucial bugs, and which bugs were, oh, hey, there's a typo in the documentation type bugs. And the community has requested a dashboard, if that would be possible for for sort of perennially displaying bugs and fixes. But in the absence of that, if that was too challenging, regular communication to the community would also be acceptable. They need to hear more about the collection of bugs and not just bugs that they've reported.
Any additional comments from the breakout group? Any comments more generally from anyone here today? Questions, suggestions? Okay, let's go to the fourth breakout session. Who's reporting back?
I'll do that, Bob, and folks can jump in as needed. We spent a little bit of time explaining the model that we have for development and how funding happens and how that affects our prioritization and our ability to apply resources things, and talked a little bit about some internal changes that will allow us to maybe devote a little more bandwidth to some of these collaborative activities. And we got some feedback on some areas where we discussed some areas where we were working. We got some feedback on areas that could use work. So there was some discussion that standing up a new data model is hard, standing up a new instance is hard. We had some reference over to perhaps what Jawad was sharing in another breakout session about some of the exciting development with the Helm charts. To launch the conversation about how we might interoperate as a community, we put up a lightweight proposal about a feature registry. This is basically just a central repository that the center can manage, that allows folks who are going to be working on something or who would like a particular feature to just describe it so that the community can see that, and perhaps collaborate on it or collaborate on requirements. We also briefly touched on handling a quarterly or some periodic surveying of the community to understand which of these current feature proposals actually was of the highest value, of the most interest for immediate work and development. And that can drive both some internal prioritization choices, but also can help community members decide where they wanted to contribute their time, or know if there was something coming that might be of value to them. In terms of actually taking contributions from the community, one of the key concerns that was raised, and a couple of people voiced this, was that it's very difficult to set up and run integration tests. And so this is an area I think that we internally need to devote some attention to and make this easier. We also discussed a couple of models for sharing contributions, especially if the center isn't ready to fully support something which is being contributed. We'd like to be able to make available community contributions, and we discussed a couple of models that might allow us to make community contributions available, even if they're not fully in the core product yet. That could maybe accelerate development and accelerate collaboration. And there could be a process of things first being a community contribution that's available to folks who want to work with it, and then possibly for some of those later becoming part of the core product, which would be fully supported by the center. And some of the examples for that included plugin architecture, separating out community and core repos, and a few other things. There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of really good points raised. I think we tried to synthesize here some of the takeaways. There's a number of follow-ups about specific features or concerns that came up that I'm not going to summarize here. Does anyone want to add anything, Alex, Bob, or any members of the group want to add anything that we should foreground here? Okay, thank you very much.
Any comments from anyone? I'll leave it to the group to sort of put their breakout slides, their one or two summary slides in the deck. If there's, I'll pause again for comments from anyone. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Stephen, who's going to do the last session on the future community development, and he'll be leading the discussion on for this very important session.
Thanks, Bob. Just give us a sec to get some slides up here. So I think the organizers and all of us are breathing a sigh of relief for delivering, I think, what was an awesome 3-day forum. I thought it'd be a good idea to maybe start with some statistics of what the inaugural forum looked like. We had 98 people registered. I think on day one, we had our peak at about 87 people online at once, which was great. We had registrations from 16 organizations covering academic, nonprofit, and industry. And we had a global community attending from Australia, from Germany, from Mali, from Saudi Arabia, from elsewhere in South Africa, and of course, from America. I thought it might be a good idea to revisit and maybe just have a quick discussion and any kind of popcorn thoughts people have on how you think we went with these. So just to revisit the community forum aims, which we invited you on the basis of, and also mentioned at the start of the forum, you know, that number one, this was around an opportunity for the Gen3 core team to share knowledge about Gen3, roadmaps, priorities, how the team operates, and of course the breakout sessions, which were all about how to improve things. Number two, to strengthen, I guess, ultimately the connection between the team and those developing and operating and using Gen3. Number three there, to design an ongoing set of community engagement activities and to put some thought and time into designing what that community looks like, what it's all about. And number four, to discuss and agree on key shared development priorities between Gen3 main and all of you, and to plan a way forward. So I was just wondering if anyone, you know, just raise your hand or just take yourself off mute if anyone had any immediate thoughts on any of that on Zoom. And if not, I might ask Bob to, if he wants to add any words to this particular topic.
No, no, I'm pass it back to you, Stephen.
Thank you. So just really my own personal recap of this last few days is there were so many awesome stories and use cases and knowledge that came out. I was personally taken aback by the just scale of things happening, the numbers across users, across deployments, the amount of data ultimately that that is being shared and ultimately made useful through the use of Gen3. There's a lot of evident diversity in people, in skills, in backgrounds and experience, and of course application areas. You know, to do Gen3 successfully requires us to bring together governance and data and operations and ultimately understanding deeply what the end user community looks like. So I think there was a really big theme for me was that there's a lot of knowledge in that. It's not, that knowledge is not contained in the Gen3 code base. So how can we work together as a community to kind of share that and particularly share it with the smaller deployments and the smaller groups to do better ultimately. And of course, there are, you know, different segments as we identified of the broader community with different interests, with different focal points and so on. And I think that we all got a lot of value out of the breakouts, certainly the ones that I was in. There was a lot of enthusiastic discussion around that. And I'm glad we decided to do the breakouts, and thank you to particularly the leads from the CTDS team that took on leading those conversations and the note takers to make those breakout sessions happen. So there's different bits of the community that I think we need to start focusing in on in future, and they have different interest areas and different priorities. You know, we have the developers and people who want to co-contribute ideas and code to Gen3, and there was a lot of great discussion around how to keep making that happen and how to smooth the way to making those things happen. So I think the idea of how do we grow and sustain a developer-focused Gen3 community is something we need to do. There's a lot of knowledge, again, not contained necessarily within the Gen3 code specifically, but around Gen3, around curating data, around building data dictionaries, around getting data into Gen3. A lot of innate knowledge out there. Again, how do we bring that community together to make this happen? And of course, just the general leadership and data owner engagement, you know, just building change and influence, building a data culture, a data-centric culture as it's called, and influencing change is a topic that's relevant to all of us and of interest to all of us. And again, how do we kind of share this knowledge? And of course, how do we just share the knowledge of starting to build the case locally here in our respective areas around building such platforms and related platforms and integrations. So, I think, Bob, I'll just take on these next couple of slides with you as well, but we are thinking through what sort of community engagements will happen in future. And I think that there's going to be various engagements that are going to ultimately operate at different timescales. There's the immediacy around daily interactions through the Slack, through the community Slack, and other mechanisms that the Gen3 team has in place. Thinking through monthly calls around development, PRs, bugs, and other things that are important to us, and having a stronger engagement between the CTDS team and the community is going to be important. And there's a commitment to establish those and run those and build them into the development cycle of things. There was a lot of interest from everyone, I think, around looking at carrying forward I guess a set of specific topics, maybe to happen every month or two or every 3 months, depending on interest and topics. But things like, you know, platform-specific deployments, you know, sharing knowledge about how things might happen on OpenStack or Azure. There was a lot of interest around data best practices. And of course, if there's interest in special interest groups or specific topic areas, let's work collectively together to think about how we can assemble those groups and help maintain them. And of course, you know, the Gen3 Community Forum, Bob, I think it's fair to say that definitely an ambition to keep doing this. I'll hand over to you to add anything you have to this slide.
No, I think this is great. I want to echo what Stephen said about just the variety of interests from developers to operators from a number of different communities from all over the world, and we want to continue this. You know, Steve and I are committed to continuing this. This is our first shot of how this might be organized. You know, we'll maintain. There's a Gen3 community section, and we'll be expanding that so that you know, in addition to the Slack channel, you can go to a website just to you know, make sure you're aware of all the resources. Stephen, is this the right time to just get feedback on if this is sort of the roughly the right cadence from the people assembled today?
Yeah. So we invite, you know, certainly there'll be an annual meeting. It's possible we'll make one of the monthly meetings, or you know, are not going to be long, but maybe quarterly or every other or twice a year. We'll have some slightly longer monthly meetings, but all this remains to be worked out. What are people's thoughts? You know, in Slack, if you have specific topics for the monthly or bi-monthly meetings, please let us know. But what are people's thoughts?
I think generally this looks awesome, and it's lovely kind of come away from this with, I guess, tangible next steps and other things coming up. So that's really nice. I think just on a couple of points, I guess, it would be nice to have somewhere to point, and maybe we've already got this and I'm just not aware, but if we become aware of other people who might want to join the community or want to search through who the community is there a way for us to do that, or invite them to
Right.
join Slack? Is there sort of a way around that possibly? And the other, I guess, thought is maybe, and I'm sure this will come, but with the monthly or possibly bi-monthly meetings on the various topics, I think it's often useful to know at what level we want to have the conversation. You know, should it be you know, our development team coming in when they've got specific PR that they're working on or related to a bug, or, you know, and want to get into really nitty-gritty conversation, or is it more of a higher level process? And we can use some of those as examples, but actually you want to have the bigger conversation. So I think it will be good to just set the expectation on that, so that we know who should be involved at which meetings and on which topics and things like that. But yeah, all really positive. Thank you.
I think so, and we can post several weeks out the agenda and segment the agenda. So, you know, maybe there's the last 20 minutes are for the developers who might have very specific questions with other, you know, we can get through 2 or 3 or possibly 4, 10 to 15 minutes items. Please, you know, put into Slack what near-term things people are, and we'll try to work out, you know, what's going to happen in, you know, month by, you know, for the next 2 months or 3 months. It's really important what Claire just said. Do we you know, I just want to pause for others before we pass it back to Stephen to weigh in on this. It's such an important set of topics to weigh in on. I mean, one reason we split it this way is we're tired in the US, but you guys are fresh and bright in the morning. So if you're from Australia and New Zealand, please speak up. This is a good time to do it. Okay, back to you, Stephen.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Oops. So, of course, this is not a CTDS only effort, this community effort. I think, Bob, I'd just like to maybe hear your thoughts on this idea that's been kicking around the Gen3 community manager, which I think is going to be a key part to making all this happen. Of course, the CTDS team, but we all need to play a role in making this community effort happen. So part of the effort will require leadership and input from everyone who's at the table. But there's certainly a plan to add coordination effort, international coordination effort within Bob's team. So did you want to briefly talk through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're actively going out to funders and other organizations to hire a full-time community manager. I think that will happen within a year. Meanwhile, we're going to gently and humanely twist someone's arm to be an interim community manager, so we don't lose the momentum. And I think also, you know, Stephen and I and others would, you know, welcome, you know, a couple others to sort of from different organizations to sort of engage in trying to do some, you know, we're essentially going to have a small steering committee also to sort of figure out how to make sure we're hearing all the possible inputs from the community. So, you know, we'll, I hope within 6 months, maybe a little longer, we'll have a long-term community manager, but we'll have some kind of interim community manager, and we're looking for volunteers from other organizations to sort of get involved in this structure. But we're committed to this. You know, we've reached a critical mass. I'm not sure I've mentioned it on this community forum, but you know, we have a number of partners out there and we're expecting, we've launched a sort of an informal goal of having over 100 Gen3 commons in the next 12 to 18 months. So there's plenty of room here for a community to emerge. And we just want to make sure it's structured right. And we're making a number of changes to Gen3 to make it much, much easier to set these up, partnering with different organizations. So, all the more reason to get the community structure organized right. So we're in a position to respond to the different communities out there.
Thank you. I just wanted to wrap up today by just saying a massive thank you to everyone who's involved. I don't think this slide captures everyone who's also been working behind the scenes to make it happen, but a bunch of us have been meeting for a number of months now on a weekly basis, or bi-weekly basis, I should say, to get this going. And apologies to the New Zealand folk for leaving you off the last slide, or the other slide there. But it has been a lot of work to get this going, and I just wanted to say a big thanks to everyone involved, and thank you to Bob and others as well. And thanks to everyone for coming.
I just want to, they're listed here. So the organizing team is in the breakout room. So I just want to add my thanks to all the people. And we tried to hide it, but this was our first Gen3 event. So thank you for bearing with us as we did this. So I just want to add my thanks and my encouragement to reach out to us to get involved. So Stephen, we're going to let them go a little early, I think, right?
That's right. Everyone gets 50 minutes back of their day. Thank you.
Yay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.